He fell asleep for 70 years after he drank from this red wine river. And as he's sleeping, these soldiers with their baggage, on their equipment trains, they're traveling through. And when these soldiers with their baggage in the equipment trains are traveling past the sleeping viceroy, the servant of the viceroy, he hides himself because he's scared of the soldiers. And afterwards, a chariot went by right after the soldiers, on these wagons. V'sham yashva bat melech, and there the princess stopped them so that she can get off. V'amda sham etzlo, and the princess, she stopped right near the viceroy where he was sleeping. V'yardu v'yashva etzlo v'kiroto. She descended from her chariot that she was sitting on, from the wagon, and she sat down next to the viceroy, v'kiroto, and she recognized him. V'ayata mina'eret oto me'od. She tried really, really hard to wake him up. V'lo ninar, but he could not be awoken. V'itchila lekabel alav. She began to complain on him. Asher kama v'chama yagiot v'trachot gedolot ma'od shayu lo. How much effort, how much great toiling. Zeh kama v'chama shanim, for so many years. Kedei shehotzi oti, in order to take me out. V'shvil oto hayom, but because of that one day, shayay chol otienu v'ibdo, because of that one day, this opportunity was lost. V'ayata boche me'od al zeh, she cried tremendously on this. Ki yesh rachmanut gadol alai v'alav alai. There's such great pity on him, meaning the viceroy, and on me. Shekol kach zaman shani kan, that all this great amount of time that I'm here, ve'eni yachol tzeit, and I'm not able to leave. I'm not able to be freed from this place. I'm not able to go out from here. Achar kach lakcha pashtela me'al rosha. Afterwards, she took off her kerchief from on top of her head. V'chatva alav bidma'ot shala, and she wrote on it with her tears. V'nichu etzlo, and she left it next to him. V'amda v'yashva b'merkavta, and she stood up and she sat down on her chariot. V'nasa misham, and she left from there. So this is the conclusion of the first half of the story. And we're learning something which is very, very deep, very meaningful, very important to know. So we're going to go through each step and try to explain it according to the Perushim, explanations that I feel are most relevant to us, that build off of what we've been doing, and to open up new chambers of understanding, new capacity for apprehension. And Bezat Hashem, everybody should hear exactly what they need to in order to move past whatever obstacles that we're going through currently in our life or have been going through in our life, to find deep consolation in the words of the tzaddik, and to have wisdom about how to move forward and inspiration to do so. The viceroy, meaning us, he falls into taiva. He falls into excessive physicality. And then after he falls into excessive physicality, he then starts yearning to fill his cup, which is Yiddish for his mind, his head, with physical wisdom, meaning wisdom of the Gashmiut world, of the external world, which Rabbi Nachman calls secular wisdom. And whereas initially his falling into physical excess put him into a spiritual daze for a period of time, but now this compilation of fallings, falling into excess, and also falling into secular wisdom, this has knocked him out for 70 years. And he's in such a deep sleep. And all of a sudden, the soldiers that were in the castle, the place of no good, they start to travel past him while he's sleeping. And they have their equipment with them. And they're on these baggage trains. Okay? So Rav Ari Kaplan brings down certain Torahs in the Qumran to explain these different things. One of those things which is brought as well from Rav Natan is that these soldiers represent fantasy, the power of imagination. So now we have spoken about this in passing, but we see here that this is really the ikar of the challenge that comes from the viceroy. That even though initially he had just the challenge, which itself seemed big enough, to just look for the viceroy and to try to find her in the place of no good. But now, instead of just having those efforts to be able to go look for her, she has a brand new obstacle. He has a brand new obstacle. And that's called the power of imagination. These soldiers, that they are now barraging her on all sides as a result of her having fallen asleep. Just in the way, like they say according to Kabbalah and Chazal, that when a person goes to sleep, Tuma comes on his hands, right? And this is the reason why, halachically, as soon as a Jew wakes up, they're supposed to go wash their hands in order to take the Tuma which they attracted while they were sleeping off. Because Rav Natan explains in the Likutei Halachot that when a person is sleeping both physically and spiritually, right, they're sleeping in their consciousness, it's not just the effect of I'm sleeping and therefore I'm not moving towards my purpose, I'm not moving towards enlightenment or spiritual mastery and closeness to Hashem in experience and in reality, but on top of that, that the sleep itself attracts negativity. It draws to itself dross, tuma, which we now have to wash our hands in order to release. Rav Natan has an unbelievable exposition why it's related to the hands, because the hands are the tools, the vessels, the kelim for actualizing our potential, right? They are our vessels for this physical world. We work with our hands, right? So the fact that the tumor is drawn on our hands, it's because even though the hands have the capacity to be lifted up in prayer, right, which is the tikkun of the hands, but they also have the proclivity as well to be drawn down to this physical world and to become immersed in it and to get lost in it because we're constantly working with our hands. So therefore we need to pour water on our hands, which Rav Natan explains in Likutei Halachot. This is the das of the tzaddik. This is this tremendous level of apprehension that the tzaddik reached in his life. Those are his waters, and those waters we're pouring over our hands because the waters always represent chasadim, revelation of godliness, pure kindness of Hashem. And by washing them over our hands, which have accumulated this tuma, this fantasy, this power of imagination, we're able to purify our hands and to utilize our hands to lift them up in prayer, which we're going to get to see in a second how that's related, because this all connects very, very well. Okay? Rabbi Nachman once said that the Gemara speaks out 7 different manifestations of the Satan in history, of the Sitra Achra, of the powers of negativity in the world, how they would express itself. There's 7 names of it, and a name is always an expression of something, right? A name is not the essence of a thing. The name expresses something. That's why you have to call somebody's name. You're not calling them. They have to respond to you. But you're calling their name, and that wakes them up, so to speak, because the name is an expression of a person. And that's the secret as well of Chazal teaching, that whenever a Jewish mother and father name their child, they automatically have Ruach HaKodesh, and they name their kid based on what their mission is. And therefore their whole life is an expression of their soul, of their name. And that's why also in the Amidah we're supposed to say a pasuk, which is has the Roshei Tevot and the Sofei Tevot, the first and last letter of your name, that you should remember your purpose so you can move towards expressing it in your lifetime. But Rabbi Nachman said, while it's true that there's 7 expressions of the Satan, he says that in the final generation, before the coming of Mashiach, referring to us now, there's going to be a brand new expression of the Sitra Achra that never was before. That's not even in the Gemara. Koach medameh. the power of imagination. And it's going to drive everyone crazy. So what's the reason for this? Now that we have learned what we learned in the past couple classes, we can understand very readily what this is. We're living in a world of physicality in which we have more physically than we ever have in history. Even a poor person, a person who doesn't have what to eat, what he doesn't have what to eat, it's so much more than a poor person in the past. Or a person has very limited means. They say that he lives in a higher state than even kings did thousands of years ago. Right? Even a person doesn't have so much. They have eggs, they have bread, they have drinks, they have juice, they have spreads, they have this, they have that. Poor people in the past never had things like this. They actually starved, right? And then all the more so, let's say you move beyond there, and let's say you have a more normative salary, right? So you mamish live like a king. You have a comfortable bed to sleep in, you have a blanket, you have heat in your home, you have air conditioning when you need it, you have all the drinks that you want on Shabbat, you can get wine, you can get bread, you can have meat, right? We have physicality on end. And then if you're wealthy, it's like, there's no end to it. And then on top of that, everything that we want to see is at our fingertips. It's mamish right there. You could see anything you want to, whenever you want to. And whatever you need, you could just press a button and it comes to you. So we have a tremendous task because on the one hand, this is a great blessing in potential. And it's a hint to the coming of the Mashiach, what it's going to be like then. Because Chazal said that there's going to be a time when sustenance will come easily. And this is a good thing. However, until Mashiach comes, there's a very big challenge that comes with this. Because if not used properly, I then fall into that first tree. And I sleep from it. And then on top of that, we have another thing which Rabbi Nachman said was coming, which was that great atheism was coming to the world. How did Rabbi Nachman know that great atheism was coming to the world? Very simply, because he saw, through his Ruach HaKodesh, that great secular wisdom was going to be drawn to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people were going to be drawn after it. And that's exactly what happened. Right after Rabbi Nachman passed, they began to bring the Jewish people in Eastern Europe into secular communities, into secular schools, and to bring them into the military of the Eastern European countries to fight for their countries in a way in which they weren't able to keep the Torah or keep the mitzvot. And they were in those militaries until they were like 20 from a very young age. So the main reason they did so was to disengage them from their spiritual roots, to move them out from their pockets, their communities in which they are getting educated in the Jewish way, to be able to distance themselves from it, so they can be brought into and to normalize them into normative culture. Okay. Now, Rabbi Nachman said that people might not think this is such a big deal. Maybe they think it's even a mila, that we're just going to expand our mind, we're going to expand our education, we're going to expand our capacity of knowing, we're going to be able to integrate in a way which is positive for us and is going to help us within the non-Jewish world as well. And Rabbi Nachman says, you have no idea what type of danger we're about to engage in, what type of vulnerabilities that are going to be heaped upon the Jewish people as a result of this. And it's said that Rabbi Nachman danced very much that year and sang and clapped much more than he ever had. And he said to his students that if people were not so cholek on me, if people were not so against me, we would be able to nullify this decree of the Jewish people being brought into secular wisdom completely. However, because that's not the case, and everyone is against me, and I only have my own strengths to rely on, so I've only been able to knock this off 5 or so years, 10 or so years, a decade, I forget exactly what he said. Whereas if everybody would help me in this, we would be able to destroy this decree completely. It's a decree. And literally, and you can look it up, it's biographical, historical evidence, you could look at it. Literally from the moment that he said this, that amount of time that he said until then was how long there was not the Jewish people being brought into the Pale of Settlement and all of the decrees that came from the secular government at that time. And as soon as that time period was up, the Jewish people were brought into new decrees and new governmental edicts that were brought in to be able to bring Jews into secular schools and into the military and X, Y, and Z. It literally lasted as long as Rabbi Nachman said that it did. And that itself was a matana. And Rabbi Nachman was saying it's because of how much, because Rabbi Nachman says that singing and clapping and dancing breaks decrees. And this is all alluded to in Purim. That's the reason why we're supposed to be so happy in Purim. We're supposed to dance, we're supposed to clap, because those things actually break decrees when they're Jewish simcha. Okay? Bezrat Hashem, later on we're going to see the depths of why that is. So what happens now? Now we're completely immersed in the secular world, that even religious people are very, very proud to know secular wisdom. They encourage it, they empower you to do it, they see great milas in it, right? And Rabbi Nachman is saying, but between that and the immersion of physicality, that both of these things came into a confluence into the world at the same time, now we're in a very deep sleep, a chastara sebetoch chastara, a concealment within a concealment. And now on top of these challenges that we're dealing with, we have an additional challenge, which is a new revelation of the Sitra Achra that never was before, which is called Koach Medameh. That instead of just having external challenges to be able to connect to Hashem, we now have what's called the power of imagination, the power of fantasy, the illusions of the heart and the mind, which are going to drive us crazy. And you see that there are epidemics in the mental health world that are just skyrocketing, in the Western world specifically, that the greater the level of understanding of the natural world, it appears to be that there's also a higher level of psychological distress. Why should that be? And you see more than seemingly any population, you see that Jews who are learning secular wisdom, who are engaged in the physical world, a lot of secular Jews and also a lot of religious Jews who are also doing these things, they need tremendous amounts of therapy and psychological assistance. They're very vulnerable to anxiety and to sadness, it seems like, in an even more intense way than even the secular world, who's also struggling with it, right? So what are they going to say? It's because really there's so many stressors in the world, and also because we lack meaning now. But the real truth is, it's because we ate from the tree and we drank from the river, and now these soldiers, while we're sleeping, are passing on us, and they're causing us to become a sugar mamish, like Rabbi Nachman says in the first Torah of Qumran, to actually be insane. And lest the person think that they're not, so you should know what goes under the category of insanity according to Rabbi Nachman. Anger is insanity. Sadness is insanity. The desire to be wealthy, Rabbi Nachman says, Avodah Zarah, it's insane. And the list goes on and on. All these things that we struggle with. To be scared of people, places, and things. It's insane. All of these insanities are driving us crazy. How many people do you know who have died from a drug overdose? How many people do you know who are receiving intense psychological treatment? How many people do you know who are struggling with different difficulties in their life and feel complete despair, complete yayush? Whereas maybe in the past, it would have been hard, but it wouldn't have been like this albatross, this like my life is over and everyone's going to be included in the end of my life, right? This just morbidness. Where is it coming from? It's coming from these soldiers, this power of imagination, which has heaped itself onto us. And to add to it, the servant, which had been with us thus far in our journey, he hid because of these soldiers. And we learned in the past that the servant is really the mind of a Jew, right? His ability to think clearly. So again, you see this thing coming together. This fantasy comes in, and my ability to think clearly leaves me. For the rest of the story, the servant is not to be found. And what we're going to see is that he's going to have to dig down deep and rely on resources which are completely non-intellectual, because his mind left him completely. He's not able to rely on his mind, because the thoughts that he's having are now coming from fantasy. They're coming from these soldiers. And after all of this, meaning that now the power of imagination is driving a person crazy, and his ability to think clearly has completely left him, and now all of his thoughts are coming from fantasy. Now, all of a sudden after this, a chariot comes by with wagons, and the Shekhinah, the lost princess, is on that wagon, passing by him. V'sham yashva bat melech, and there was sitting the bat melech. V'amda sham etzlo, she stopped the wagon next to him. She got off. She descended, yarda, she descended from this wagon, and she sat down next to him, and she recognized him. We're not so far away from Hanukkah. And we know that by the Baal Shem Tov, Hanukkah was like the biggest Chag of the year. For the Baal Shem Tov, it was all about Hanukkah. Right? For Rabbi Nachman, it was all about Rosh Hashanah. For the Baal Shem Tov, it was all about Hanukkah. What's so special about Hanukkah? It's taught in Kabbalah and Chassidut that those candles that we light, which end up equaling, I think it's 49. I have to go back and do the math, how many candles it is. But however many candles it is that we end up lighting through the course of Hanukkah, it adds up to the amount of time that the light shone in the beginning of creation, the Oregonus, the light which Adam saw from the beginning until the end of creation, the light that the Zohar says was shown to Moshe right before he passed away, when Hashem told him to ascend to the mountain to see the land of Israel, and he showed him from the beginning until the end. The same light that the Zohar says that Hashem showed King David, and he said, wow, how fortunate are those who have awe of you and what's in store for them, right? So that's the light that shines on Hanukkah. Now the Chiddush of Hanukkah, though, is that usually when it comes to the Chagim, we have to go to Hashem, right? We have to go to Yerushalayim. We have to elevate ourselves to get to Hashem on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur. We have to get to the King. Sukkot, we have to build a home, right? We have to go outside of ourselves and elevate to new places and to be able to find Hashem in our life, but through tremendous self-work and self-sacrifice, to be able to move above and transcend from our prior place. It's very difficult. We have to go to Hashem. We have to go to Him in His place, in His house, in His backyard, so to speak. But what's unique about Hanukkah is that Hanukkah came on the heels of the Greeks coming into the land of Israel. And what were the Greeks known for? Secular wisdom. They were the harbingers of secular wisdom. They brought it into the world, so to speak. That before the Greeks, what was the exile? It was the exile of Persia. It was the exile of Purim. What happened in the exile of Purim? That we had the Geula that took place in Persia, right? We fell into taiva. We ate non-kosher food with the non-Jewish world, and as a result of us not being able to overcome our desire for physicality, we didn't listen to the tzaddik, we didn't listen to Mordechai, and we ended up getting exiled in a very deep, almost life-threatening way, right? That came from eating from that tree. And immediately, what's the next exile? The exile of Greece. And we see that what did they bring? They brought secular wisdom. And we see what happens after that. You have the final exile, the exile of Esav, the exile of Edom, which is these soldiers, the power of imagination, the one in which is so intense at the end, which won't be rectified in full until the Mashiach comes. So you literally see each step of this story taking place, and they're all culminating and accumulating together. Each one is working off the other. But the Greeks brought secular wisdom in. And what does that block us all from? It blocks us off from this light in the beginning of creation, this light of ancient days, this healing light, this light which is so pure and so beautiful, it's so godly. It's something which can't even be contained in this physical world, but originally it was able to because of the state of existence. That light that shone in the beginning before the Chet of Adam Rishon. And on Hanukkah, not only does that light shine, be'emet, that same light that shone then, but it comes to you in your house. And this is all alluded to that halachically, the Chanukiah, where you put the menorah, the Hanukkah, the Hanukkah lights, where you light up the oil, it has to be below 10 tefachim. It has to be below a certain amount. So we know that according to halakha, anything which is above 10 is like in a different domain. That's the reason why halachically, let's say in a room, right? Yeah, kosher or holy things, kodesh things, you're not allowed to have in a place of sexual intimacy, in a place of nakedness, right? But if you put it above 10 tefachim, then even though it's still in that room, it's mamish like it's in a completely different domain. And in that case, it's mutar, it's allowed. Right, so we see with the sukkah as well, it needs to be 10 high. And we see with many things, it has to be at least 10 high, or it needs to include 10. Why? Because 10 represents something which is transcendent. 10 represents a moving into the spiritual domain, something which is elevated above this physical world, above the mundanity and the challenges of our life, right? And usually we have to go there to find Hashem. On Hanukkah, you're not allowed to do it that high. It has to be low. Why does it have to be so low? Because the whole inyan of Hanukkah is that it's a greater light that even shines on the days of the Chagim that we go to Hashem, except this light comes to us. How we could think of it is, according to halakha, you're supposed to go visit a Jewish person who's sick, and you're supposed to try and encourage him. And it says very clearly in Chazal, why? Because the Shekhinah is hovering over the sick person's head. And we see here as well that this person who's sleeping, the Shekhinah comes to him. Whereas before he's trying to find her in the castle, and he's trying and toiling so hard to get her out of there. Just like on the Chagim, that we're trying so hard to find Hashem where he's at. In this case, we're sleeping completely. We're in every depths of the exile, of the physical exile, of the psychological exile, of the educational exile. And now the Shekhinah, she comes to us because of how deeply that Hashem loves us, how deeply He cares for us, that He wants us to be able to try and get her on our own volition. But if we can't, then He just comes to us. And He's crying over us, waiting for us to wake up, waiting for us to wake up from our slumber and to look for her again, to start over again, to believe again, to hope again. And on Hanukkah, she comes to us. The Shekhinah comes to us in our own homes, with our own families, to each and every single Jewish person. And I had a chiddush on this. I grew up completely secular. We didn't do Pesach in a legitimate way, right? We weren't doing the Seder in a way which was according to Halacha. We were probably eating chametz, right? I didn't keep Yom Kippur. I never fasted the whole day, even though my parents had done that. Obviously, like on the more specific Chagim that only, let's say, religious people know about, Tish B'Av, I for sure wasn't doing Tish B'Av, right? I didn't know about Shmini Atzeret. I didn't know about dancing with the Torah and Simchat Torah, right? All these different nuanced holidays that we have, right? I didn't keep any of them. I didn't know of most of them. But one thing for sure that I knew of, that I look forward to all year, was Hanukkah. And if you think about it, it's a very deep thing, that the secular Jewish world doesn't know anything about the Chagim. And even the ones that they do, they don't actually know what they are and what they're for. Right? It's like a cultural phenomenon for them. But everyone knows Hanukkah. Everyone's excited about Hanukkah. Everyone lights Hanukkah lights. No matter how secular a Jew is. Even if Chas v'Chalila, they're also lighting a Christmas tree. But you won't see a Jewish family in the secular world who does not light Hanukkah lights. Why is that? So obviously, if you just take it for face value, because we're able to give gifts just like non-Jews do for a holiday which is very close for them, and therefore to give to our kids so that they don't feel left out, right? There's many, I'm sure, that's the word. There's many historical reasons and circumstances that we can use to explain this away. But Rabbi Nachman says not to satisfy yourself with these. Look for the chokhmah and everything. And I feel like in a way, this is the Shekhinah, this is the lost princess coming to every single Jew in the world, that we're all sleeping. That even though we're sleeping, and even though we don't know how to get to Hashem anymore, we don't even know that there is such a thing. But in the middle of that sleep, she comes to us, at least once a year on Hanukkah. And every Jew does this. Every Jew has the Shekhinah visit them, right? And they don't even know it. It's an unbelievable thing. Like, this is the one thing that we have left in exile, is Hanukkah, the lights of Hanukkah. Rabbi Nachman said that one of the 3 times that people should come to him, one of them obviously everyone knows is Rosh Hashanah, the other one is Shavuot, and the last one is Shabbat Hanukkah. Bezrat Hashem, I really hope to be there. I want to bring my son, Bezrat Hashem, for the first time. Rabbi Nachman says that if anybody brings their son to me before they turn 7 years old, I'm going to make sure that I get them to the chuppah, and they're going to be free of all averot. And he says, I believe this with Emunah Shlema, and I've heard many stories of people who have confirmed that this actually takes place. So I've been praying for a long time to bring my son before he turns 7. I wasn't able to bring him for Rosh Hashanah this past year. I really hope to bring him for Shabbos Chanukah. So anybody who's watching this class, men or women, I really encourage you, especially for the women, this is an amazing chance. This is when most women do go. It's very spiritual, it's very elevated, it's something very deep. There's even trips that go there. I think Rav Arush's wife runs a trip. I know there's many trips that are run there just specifically for women. There's a whole women's section by the Tzion. It's very kedai. It's very kedai to go. It's very beautiful, and you're in Europe where it's so cold and it's so dark. And in some ways, it's almost like when it's really cold outside, and then you have hot soup. It's like the best thing you ever had in your life. Even though normally, like, I don't care about having very plain soup, but then all of a sudden, if it's freezing outside, I come in, it's hot soup. It's like the most delicious thing. So like, it enhances the whole experience. But it was a big thing by Rabbi Nachman to be by him for Shabbos Chanukah, because Chanukah is a big deal. Chanukah is a very, very big deal. The Shekhinah is coming to us even in the midst of our sleep, crying, waking us up, but being there with us. And now we're able to access that light and to experience it. And I forget where I saw it, but I ended up taking this Eitzah. But it says that on the first night of Hanukkah, when that light shines, if you sit there and you say Tehillim and you cry from the bottom of your heart, not because you're forcing yourself to, but because it's real for you, and you pray for anything, you'll get it. And I actually did it one time. I had the zchut to be able to authentically, genuinely cry and to pray one time in that place. I've told that story many times. I'm not going to say it right now. And I saw a big nace. Big nace. Because that's the light of ancient days. That's actually the light that's in these stories. Comes to visit us. And she's trying to wake him up. So can you imagine? Like, we're thinking to ourselves our whole life, with everything that we've been through, parents getting divorced, parents being absent, acrimony with siblings, tragedies experienced, or maybe everything was groovy, but I was just living a completely mundane, completely meaningless existence, doing things which had no inherent value and didn't help me or anybody around me, be'emet. I was sleeping. And to know that be'emet, Hashem is there, crying with you every day, trying to wake you up, not giving up on you, ever. Never giving up on you. And Rabbi Nachman explains that the Shekhinah is always with the tzaddik. So many times we say to ourselves, like, I don't see Hashem in my life. I don't see how Hashem is trying to help me. I don't see His kindness. Right? A person might even say, I connect much more to, let's say, Rabbi Nachman, and I feel much more loved by him than I even do by Hashem. Chas v'chalila. Right? Because we think to ourselves, because he's not physical, and we don't understand that is Hashem's love for us. It's coming through tzaddikim. That love that you see from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, from the Baal Shem Tov, from Rav Moshe Feinstein, from Rav Chaim Kanievsky. You see these great tzaddikim and how they cry, Rav Avadia Yosef, how they cried for the Jewish people with no end. And they gave to them everything that they had, every fiber of their being. They didn't do anything for themselves. It was all to try to help Jewish people. What is that? That's Hashem's love. It's coming through tzaddikim. And in case a person says to themselves, yeah, but like that, how do you know that? How do I know that's not coming somewhere else? Rashi says it very clearly in the Torah. There's a mitzvah of having devekut with Hashem. We need to cling to Hashem. We need to draw close to Hashem, to be intimate with Hashem, to attach ourselves to Hashem. So Rashi says over there, but Hashem's not physical. So it's a very beautiful idea, but this is a mitzvah d'oraita. It's like a mitzvah to keep Shabbat. It's a mitzvah to keep kosher. How do I have devekut with Hashem? Not Kabbalistically, not something mystically. I want to know just Pshat. Tell me how I keep this mitzvah. I want to become the mitzvah. Rashi says over there very clearly, through spending time with Chachamim, through being close to tzaddikim, through attachment to tzaddikim. Rashi says, in explaining how we become this mitzvah of devekus with Hashem, it's by having closeness to tzaddikim. It's a Rashi. Nobody argues on a Rashi. Nobody has a problem. Okay? So where's Hashem's love for me? How many times do you see that Torah that you need from Rabbi Nachman at the moment that you need it most? How many times do you hear the words from a mashpia to empower you, to encourage you, to get you to start over again, to tell you that Hashem loves you, He believes in you, He wants the best for you? That's Hashem talking to you. It's coming through the tzaddikim and their students, right? And we get a special dose of this on Hanukkah, an extra experience if we enter into it. And to know that she never left us, she was always there. Oh, and what about those times that the tzaddik wasn't there? What about those times that his students weren't there? What about the times that I didn't have Torah, I didn't have spirituality, right? Somehow, some way, we see that also, that there's him falling into the first tree and then falling into the river, and that's before the Shekhinah comes to his head. Somehow, some way, he needed to reach a certain level of sleep. Just like Adam Arishon, he fell asleep in the garden. Just like Yaakov Avinu, he fell asleep. Just like Avram Avinu, he fell asleep. There has to be some level of deep sleep for some reason before the Shekhinah can come to you. The exile has to get so bleak and so dark, like Hanukkah, that in the midst of the winter time, in the midst of the exile, that Hashem comes to us bedavka in that time. And He's there. He's always there. Always trying to arouse you, always trying to awaken you. And as time goes on, you can actually go back and see it. You can really see it. And you can also see how you fell in these places. Like, I've thought a lot about this. And then meditating on this class and thinking about giving it over. I literally, in my Hiboru, dude, I'm like out in the field, in the mountains. And I'm remembering when I was a little kid. And how when I was very young, I believed very much in God. And in fact, I actually, apparently, my parents said that I tried to get my parents to keep Shabbat. I tried to have my parents eat kosher. I don't even remember all these things. And then they took me from that Orthodox preschool and they put me in secular kindergarten. I lived in a secular community. The only reason I was in that place, my parents said, was because they took me the whole day. So as opposed to taking me for like half a day, they took me the whole day. So I was awake. And then I got thrown into the secular world. And I learned all the secular ideas. And then I started to experience tremendous challenges in my life. Friends that I thought were my friends, that bullied me, that teased me, that spoke very badly about me, things that maybe it's normal for kids to do, but it wasn't normal for me. I never understood like why you would be friends with somebody and speak badly about them. And I saw them doing it all the time to each other. I didn't know they were doing it about me. And then when I realized they're doing it about me, it's like, wow, it hits you in a different way. And then I've spoken about this before, how instances of being bullied and people running away, and it really hurt me. It was like traumatic for me. I didn't understand the cruelty. It like wasn't a part of my being. I couldn't fathom it. And what ended up happening after that? I started smoking weed. I started to engage in chasing after girls and chasing after every pleasure that I could. And then I found evolutionary theory, secular wisdom. And then I ended up, like mamish, becoming a religious atheist. And I was busy with it. I was learning the books. I was reading. I was learning the shiurim. I was Bucky in it, expert in it. And I was trying to disprove the existence of God to everybody that I knew. Because I was in so much pain. And not just in so much pain. You see very clearly, it's these steps. There's the breaking. And then there's the engaging in physical excess. And then there's the engaging in secular wisdom. And then I was asleep. I was gone. Completely. And it was like only like at the point of the 49 gates of Tumah where there is no turning back, that Hashem found a way to get to me. He found a way to open my eyes. But looking back now, I could see how really his fingerprints were there the whole time. Different things that took place, like, oh, that was Hashem. Oh, that was Hashem. He was trying to like speak to me then. He was trying to reach out to me then, like different ways, even like, I'll just give you an example. When I was in college and I was studying to be a therapist and a social worker, they ended up having they gathered us all around, and on the last day they were explaining what they felt were the milas of each person in the group. There was like 2 Jewish people in the whole program. 2 Jewish boys. I think there was more Jewish girls. Me and somebody else. And they started by talking about me, and first of all, it was very weird. And the supervisor, instead of like speaking about me in the beginning, he starts going into a whole drasha. Not Jewish, Catholic, Tony, grew up in Brooklyn, lives in California now, licensed clinical social worker, doctorate in social work, like very successful in the field. And he starts speaking to the whole chevra, the whole class. He goes, if you want to know who David is, you're going to have to understand the Jewish people. It's like unbelievable. I'm watching, listening, like I had no idea what was going on. And he starts explaining the greatness of the Jewish people and what they represent in the world. And their undying hope and belief in good and empowerment. And how they refuse to believe that things can't happen. And because of that, they're able to overcome every obstacle. And even he starts to speak about his own circumstances in life and how when he was a little kid, he used to get hundreds on all of his tests. But he was in a Catholic school, and they used to say at the end of the year, who, even before high school even, as a little kid, who's the valedictorian, who's the best student in the grade. And he didn't get it, even though he got perfect scores on every test. This other kid got it because apparently he also had perfect scores on every test, but he had extracurricular activities, whereas Tony didn't. And he said that at the time he didn't have the ability to understand and comprehend that he was still also smart. It didn't take away from what he was achieving. It just meant that this person had extracurricular activities. He internalized it as that he was stupid, that he wasn't smart. And after this, he started doing bad in school, and he started to become very disassociated and very disattached. And he started failing all of his tests through high school, until he said that I finally got to a high school where he said that there was Jewish people. And he said, for the first time in the world, I knew that women were smart because I met Jewish women. And he said I had a teacher who was a Jewish teacher. And he said that as opposed to in the other classes where I just handed in a blank piece of paper and they took it and they graded me and they failed me, this teacher called me over and he said to me, Tony, why is the test blank? And he said, I don't know the answers. And he said, okay, but why don't you put an answer? Why don't you put what you do know or what you think? He goes, I can't. I just can't. Obviously, he doesn't know the whole backstory. He's not opening up to anybody. He said that teacher looked me in the eyes and he said, Tony, you can do this. Just do it. And it wasn't the message itself, but he was explaining how the visceral nature of this person, how he so deeply believed in the capacity of man to succeed and to overcome. And that he looked at me with those eyes and he told me, you can do this. That he said he felt for the first time someone believed in him. And he said that belief is Jewish. It's so deep. It's emunah, and then it's probably a secular teacher, but that emunah is so deep, the belief that you can. And he said that I filled that test out. He said I did great on it because I actually knew the answers. I just developed this anxiety and this phobia. And he said from that moment forward, I started to work on believing in myself and realizing that I was good. All from the Jewish people. This whole thing, he's talking about me in this whole thing. And then he says that I don't even know if David's going to end up in this field. And I'm like sitting there thinking, I just went to 6 years of school for this. And I'm trying so hard to be a therapist, to be a counselor, to be a social worker. And he's saying he said like, Be'emet, I don't even think you're going to end up in this field. But he said, like, whatever you do, I feel like your potential is unlimited. And then like another, like a Spanish girl in the back, she raises her hand and she says, David, if you ever end up teaching, please let me know, because I want to hear that class. And it's so crazy now, like looking back, because there's no way in my mind I ever thought at that point I would ever teach, let alone Torah, right? And how like I could see looking back how Hashem's fingerprints were all over this thing. That the Shekhinah was with me when I was sleeping. Like, don't worry, I got you. You're going to a different place than you anticipated, but it's the place you really want to go to. And it's the same thing for everybody. Everybody at their own level has this. Because we are really mamish Hashem's children. And He's never leaving us. And either when we're looking for Him, He might move back to give us space to run after Him. Or if we're struggling, He moves in close so that you know that He's with you. But He's always there. And it doesn't change. Trying to wake us up, but we're not able to. And she starts to cry. How much that we're toiling, how much that we're trying, and yet we're not freeing her from exile. And she cried very much. It's tremendous pity and on him, on me and on him, that all this time and I'm still stuck here. I haven't been able to be taken out. And afterwards she takes the kerchief from her head and she writes on it with her tears. And she placed it next to him. What is that kerchief? So what we're going to see, Bezrat Hashem, next week, is that on this kerchief, it says that I'm no longer in that castle, in the place of no good. I'm going towards the Golden Mountain and the Pearl Castle. And that's where you can find me. But it wasn't that she spoke it to him. It was written in a love letter to him. And a letter that was from her tears. It was written with her tears. And what we're going to see in a moment as well, or at least next class, is that he held up the letter to the sun. And by holding up the letter to the sun, he was able to read, after he woke up, what the letter said. Whereas prior to this, even though he had this letter written with the tears, without looking at it through the sun, you couldn't see, you just saw a blank paper, right? Or something stained, but didn't know what it was. And then when he lifted up that stained, filled love letter to the sun, he was able to see that I'm now in the Golden Mountain in the Pearl Castle and to come look for me there. Okay? So, Rav Aryeh Kaplan explains two very fundamental things. That within her crying from this kerchief that was above her head, we find the way to find the lost princess. She was giving him the way to get to the Golden Mountain in the Pearl Castle. And you see, for the rest of the story, he utilizes these things, even though he doesn't actively know that that's what's going on. What are those things? One is that she takes the kerchief from on top of her head. Why does she take the kerchief from on top of her head to write on that and to give it to him? Because like we've explained in the past, the mind is the place of intellect. And now that the soldiers have barraged the soldier, and that even when he wakes up, he's now dealing with the power of imagination. Now his intellect has left him. He can't rely anymore on his own thoughts because they lead to destruction, because they're coming from fantasy instead of from truth. And so from now on, she's saying to him, you can't find your way to me through intellect. You have to find your way to me through something which transcends intellect. That's the kerchief which was above the head, right? And that is faith. And now we can understand why Rabbi Nachman is constantly screaming, crying to us. Emunah, tefillah, bitachon, trust, faith, prayer, like a child, like a woman, with tamimut, with pashitut, with simplicity, with genuinity, with authenticity. Nothing extraneous, nothing external, nothing sophisticated. Simple, 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 like a child. Simple faith. Why? Rabbi Nachman is a genius. Unparalleled. He should have created a whole revelation of Torah that we can live with, that's super sophisticated, that's super intellectual. Clearly you see from Rabbeinu that the only way to find the lost princess now, that the power of imagination has struck the world, and atheism has come into the world and entered into our hearts, there is no way anymore to find the princess except for something which transcends intellect, which is emunah, which is faith. And how does that emunah faith, how does it reflect itself? How does it reveal itself? Because she cried from that faith. She cried. And even though we are used to crying, and we've cried our whole life from the different difficulties and challenges that we've been through, and that we currently go through, Rabbi Nachman says, don't cry about that. There's something greater to cry for. God, the Shekhinah, Beit HaMikdash, the revelation of the Creator in the world, the revelation of your Father in your life. Transfer all of the tears that come from disappointment, that come from distress, that come from failure, and elevate those tears. That they should be tears of hope, that should be tears of yearning, that they should be tears of desire. And through these tears, and through this faith, you'll find me in the Golden Mountain and the Pearl Castle. And what's the whole Indian with tears? Why should it be that tears are so powerful? Faith, I understand, I've been learning Brasav Chassidus for years. Emunah, I can get, Emunah is very deep. Emunah obviously fills in all the gaps. Emunah gives me a template to live with, to be able to go through the difficulties in my life, and to be able to yearn for more when I'm striving and I'm doing well. What's tears? What's the whole ikr with tears? Why is it that Brasav Chassidim are known for getting up early in the morning and crying before the day starts? And Hibodedut and Tikkun Chatzot. To the extent that I told this to a student recently. A lot of people don't know this. I spoke about this in this last class that was uploaded. It was based on a lesson in Likutei Moharan. Why is it that the Tzaddik Emet and his students who try to learn from him are always disparaged and always discouraged, And at the peak, sometimes they're even threatened in violent ways. And you've seen this over history, whether it was with Rabbi Nachman and the Shmuel Zeta, or whether it was Rav Natan and the Savanta Rav, right? But it was very, very deep, to the extent that by the time that Rabbi Nachman passed away and Rav Natan had revitalized Rabbi Nachman's students, usually when a Hasidic master dies, it dies with him. And we've seen this over and over and over again over history. And Rav Natan understood that Rabbi Nachman didn't want that. Like he said, my fire is going to burn until Mashiach comes. It should grow, right? Somehow it is going to have a greater effect now that I'm gone. So Rav Natan literally spent his whole life printing his teachings, writing original discourses based on his teachings, building up the klois in Uman, getting people to come together as sichot teverim, as friends, to empower each other, to encourage each other, to lift each other up. And there was a time that the animosity towards Rav Natan was so great that literally there was a death threat on him. That they were actually people who were tasked to assassinate him. I'm not kidding. You can look at it in his autobiography. And I want to say Baruch Hashem, but I don't know the other person what happened. But for Rav Natan, Baruch Hashem, the assassins, they did kill a Natan, but they found the wrong one. And Rav Natan survived because of this, but they actually thought that they killed Rav Natan. Like, that's how bad it was. And what was he doing? All he did was learn, pray, teach. That was it. It was crazy, right? And there was a point at which they were trying to get his neighbor to be a part of like this conspiracy theory towards Rav Natan and how he's a heretic. He's causing the demise of the Jewish people. He's drawing people into this cult, and they tried to get his neighbor, who was part of like the normative religious Jewish world at the time, to say that his neighbor Rav Natan was an anarchist, that he was an apikoursis, that he was doing things that weren't kosher, and his neighbor said back to them, "Are you talking about the guy that I hear every morning while everybody's sleeping, screaming and crying over the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and the fact that none of the Jewish people have their father, that he's hidden from us? Are you talking about that same person that I hear screaming and crying at the top of his lungs at midnight every single night while we're all sleeping? You're talking about that person? That's the same Natan you're talking about? For sure I'm not going to be part of this. That person's a tzaddik mamish." Right? And so, where's this concept of crying coming from? Why on the one hand is Rabbi Nachman telling us that we should be besimcha tamid, but that for one period, for an hour every day, that we should pour forth our heart like water, with tears? So Rabbi Nachman explains in the Likutei Moharan that crying actually draws hashgacha pratit, it draws divine providence into the world. And that really be'emet, this physical world has no divine providence whatsoever. So whenever there is divine providence, where is it coming from if it's not coming from this world? Rabbi Nachman says it's coming from the future, from Olam Haba, from the days of Mashiach, when there will only be hashgacha pratit. Hashem is drawing from the future into the present that you should have providence. And what is it that draws that providence? It's tears. And we see as well that when did Hashem decide to save the Jewish people? When they cried out in Mitzrayim. That there's something about tears that no exile, no secular wisdom, no falling in taiva, nothing can stop the power of tears. And this Chazal say clearly that even though since the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, every gate in heaven has been closed, but there's one gate that's still open, and that's the gate of tears. Why? Because tears draw hashgacha pratit. Because according to Kabbalah and Chassidut, the eyes are the concept of providence. This is the secret of why it says that Hashem's eyes are always on the land of Israel from the beginning until the end of the year. Because Rabbi Nachman explains that his eyes being on it means that in the land of Israel there's only divine providence, so to speak. It's like above this state of exile, that really everything is going through his hand, and you feel that when you're here. And that's why Rabbi Nachman says that the only way to get to the land of Israel is through a lot of crying, to be in the land. Because this is the place of divine providence. And that comes from the tears that come from the eyes. Because before the eyes were blemished, they were mired in fantasy and imagination. But through my tears, the tears are clearing out my eyes. And they're letting me have a new life in my eyes. My eyes should be illuminated. Through these tears, they bring providence. And he says that this is the secret as well from the Gemara, that it says that when Hashem is looking at his children, that they're in so much pain. And the Gemara says they're really only in pain because they've been so assimilated in the secular world that they think like non-Jews, that they're educated like non-Jews, they respond to life like non-Jews. And so as a result of that, beyond just the normative pain that happens with this world, the tremendous psychological, emotional suffering is coming from just living with non-Jews for so long. And that as a result of this, Hashem cries, and that crying is felt through rain that comes from the sky and enters into this great ocean. And Rabbi Nachman explains there that there's a way of understanding this, that it's from our tears, that because we're suffering from not just the non-Jewish world, but non-Jewish thought processes, from power of imagination, the non-Jewish part of us, that it's compressing us and contracting us on all sides. And when we cry, right, we're crying from that place. And that causes Hashem, so to speak, to make it rain. And that rain is providence. This is probably as well why Rabbi Nachman says in Sefer Amidot that every Baal Tshuva should pray each day at least once for rain. Doesn't say about people who grew up religious, doesn't say about people who are tzaddikim. It says that Baalei Tshuva specifically should pray every day for rain. Because we're so immersed, it's so inculcated in us that even when we leave Mitzrayim hasn't left us. And what we see though, is that he was not able to read this letter until he lifted this letter of Amunah and crying up to the sun. Rabbi Nachman explains in the Kutumran, and this is based on Chazal, that the sun is the tzaddik emet. He's the true tzaddik. Just like the sun illuminates for you, tells you how to go, shows you where to go, just like the sun provides life force for you and everything around you, just like the sun makes you feel happy and joyful, right? There's so many benefits to the sun. All those same benefits apply through the tzaddik. And where do we see this in Chazal? Because Yosef HaTzaddik, he had a dream about the sun, the moon, and the stars, and how they all were bowing down to him. And Yosef, by the way, is the figure most associated with Hanukkah as well, and there's a deep reason for that. Because he's the antithesis of Greek wisdom. The tzaddik, this great tzaddik, Yosef HaTzaddik, he's the one who fights all of this and helps the Jewish people to overcome it. He draws the light from the 7 days of creation, even into this exile. But we see here that Yosef has this dream, and the sun, the moon, and the stars, and Yaakov says, and the Midrash says clearly, he said he knew the dream was true because he said, how did Yosef know that my name is Shemesh, the sun? And it says about Moshe Rabbeinu that Moshe's face shone like the sun. And according to Kabbalah, Yaakov, the soul of Yaakov, was actually Moshe. That the wisdom of Yaakov was Moshe himself. Okay, this, like, everybody has a body and a soul, so to speak. The body of Yaakov, of Jacob, is Yaakov, but the soul of Yaakov is Moshe. And so we see by both of these figures, whether it's in Chazal and the Midrash that Yaakov says, I'm the sun, or whether it's also in Chazal, but about Moshe Rabbeinu that his face shone like the sun, as opposed to Yoshua that his face shone like the moon, right? So we see clearly that this archetypal tzaddik, this great tzaddik, this transcendent tzaddik, the one who has reached the highest pinnacle of spiritual elevation and has no thought of himself whatsoever and is completely mavatal to the Jewish people, to Hashem, and to the Torah. So he's like the sun for us. And we see here too that even though he's always had the power of faith, and even though he's always had the power of tears, or maybe even once he becomes religious, right, he becomes spiritually inclined, he starts to learn Torah, and now he really understands and he sees the Torah speaks about crying to Hashem, the Torah speaks about faith, but he doesn't really understand the value of it, right? He understands the value of learning. He might have a learning seder every day. He might learn day and night, but the value of crying like a child, that is not as salient for me. The value of pure, simple faith in Hashem that goes above intellect, this is not something that's valued. So, but then all of a sudden, through your journey, you have the schut to lift up that letter which Hashem gave you, the Shekhinah herself gave you, to the Son, meaning to the Tzaddik. And all of a sudden you start to see the beauty of faith. And you start to see the beauty of crying. And you see how they're actually the keys to redemption. They're the keys to your personal geula. They're the keys to the geula at large. But you need to be able to show that love letter to the Son, to see that be'emet, these things that you always had within you are really the keys to you finding the Shekhinah in your life. And Bezrat Hashem, next week, we're gonna move forward and find out about where she is and how he ends up pursuing her. But you see, for the rest of this story, through every obstacle now that he faces, when he's close to getting to her and he doesn't find her, he cries. And through that crying, you see right after that, he's able to take another step to get closer to her. Each time, through crying and through faith, through crying and through faith. Not through intellectual wisdom, not through deeper understanding, through simple faith and through crying, he's able to find the lost princess in the end. Okay? I just want to tell you, by the way, I try very hard to, if Hashem gives me this chut, to get to sleep really early, especially the day before this class, and to do my hour of Hibodedut even before we do the class in the morning. This class is very important to me, and I believe like it's very, very, very important for us, for the students, and for the world. Like I really hold that the key to everything is in these stories, and I'm not the only one. Rabbi Nachman himself said that these stories are geula, these stories are redemption. So I try as best as possible to have yishuv da'at, to be able to pray, to be able to speak words that everybody needs to hear. And while I was outside just now on my deck, asking Hashem to please take us out of exile, help us. I just done chatzot right before that, so now I'm an hour and a half into tefillah of crying to Hashem to help us leave this place. How many people are suffering? How many people are in so much emotional, psychological pain simply because they don't know that there's a God in the world, that they don't know that the Torah is true, that they don't know that there are true tzaddikim who are visiting us all the time, trying to help us, who have the ability to help us, that we will be able to overcome and traverse all challenges in our life and to find true joy in our life and meaning. It's right in front of us, and we're all sleeping. If you really think about it, it's the most painful thought. It's a crazy thought to think about. And as I was talking about it outside, it started to drizzle. And it's drizzling, and I said, Hashem, please, I hope that these are your tears. And these are the tears that Rabbi Nachman speaks about, the tears of providence that are coming into the world when you see that we've been in exile so long amongst the non-Jewish world, and we just can't find our way out of here, and we're suffering only due to this. That these are your tears, and you're crying with me. And I swear to God, it started pouring rain. And normally, I would just go back into the apartment and just finish the Hibodedut there. But I had such a visceral experience of Hashem talking to me, answering me, crying with me. Like Rabbi Nachman says, anybody who gets up for Chetzot, that the Shekhinah is with you, crying over her not being with you, and the learning of the Torah that you do, she's there with you, watching from Gan Eden, enjoying with the tzaddikim as you're doing that. and it was just unbelievable. I just sat there for like 10, 15 minutes, just letting it rain, feeling the rain on me, instead of the rain being like, oh man, rain, drizzle, why do we have to do this, da, 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 da. Just to feel like Hashem's tears. But they're not tears of hopelessness, they're tears of hashgacha pratit, they're tears of providence, they're tears of hope, they're tears of consolation, that this will end. Geula will happen, Mashiach will come, the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt, and it's going to be built based on all of our faith and tears that we have. Does anybody have any questions from this class? Questions. Take advantage. We do this once a week. You never know. Any comments, questions? Nothing. Hopefully it's because you're speechless. Can someone just let me know they heard the class? That would make me feel great. Although it was good for me to hear this. Anybody, was this class heard, understood, anything? Oh, you got it. Oh, very good. Wow, such nachat. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, guys. I love you so much. Everybody have an amazing, amazing week. Oh, there's a comment here. 1 second. Wait. You're asking a question. Very good. Let's go. Someone has a question. Okay, so ask it. You can't hear us. Why can't I hear you? 1 second. Take yourself off mute. Federico. Fed. I can't hear you. Can anybody else hear Fed?
I can hear him.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My computer was on mute. That was probably a very vulnerable moment for you. I'm so
Can you hear
sorry.
us?
Yes, I can hear you also. Wow, great mustache. You look like you've been going to the mikveh a lot. You're doing good, Rami. Keep it up. No? Okay, good. Yeah, Fed, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. So for those of us that maybe it's a little bit more difficult to cry, perhaps, our hearts are kind of stonish.
Yes.
What does Rabbi Nachman say about helping us with that?
Yeah, sure. So Rabbi Nachman says that by continuously every day speaking words of truth, turning his Torah into tefillah, that is like water, okay? And even a rock with enough time exposed to water will crack. Some people, it takes years before they can cry. But when it cracks big, and the tears flood, and every Jew is capable of this. And it doesn't matter if a person is more stoic or it's more difficult for them to cry. You don't have to try to cry. Rabbi Nachman actually encourages not to do that. Don't try to cry. Just try every day your very best to pray as genuinely as possible, but specifically turn his Torah into tefillah. If you do this every single day, and also it helps very, very much to think about what you're letting into your system. A lot of things that are physically excessive, whether it's food or it's drink or it's even media, they like dull your spiritual sensitivities. And so I know that for me personally, that when I stopped looking at secular wisdom and I started working very hard on my eating and my drinking and eating, in moderation and just like using the physical world as a tool for spirituality and not just like embellishing in it, and as well obviously with learning Rabbi Nachman's teachings, doing Hippodah, do it every day, turning Torah into tefillah, as time went on you start to develop more sensitivities to spiritual things, sensitivities to what we have lost, sensitivities to what we hope for, sensitivities towards other people, right? Rabbi Nachman says very clearly that the more das that a person achieves, the more rachamim that they experience, the more empathy that they have. And this, Rabbi Nachman explains, is why the leader of the Jewish people has to have the greatest rachamim in the whole world. Why? Because his rachamim is a function of his das. The greater his God consciousness becomes, the more automatically you become empathetic, because these two things go together. But we are naturally, some people more than others, but everyone to this extent. And to know, it's very, very important to know that Rabbi Nachman says very clearly that anybody who struggles with anything that's a spiritual milah, it's because he has the opposite in potential. So not to think to myself like, oh man, like I'd be lucky if I ever get a tear. No, you should know that if you struggle with it, that if you keep going and you don't give up and you do your best to implement what we just spoke about over the course of time, then you'll be able to cry deeper even than a person who cries naturally. You just it's these reservoirs that are deep in like a wellspring, like they're under the ground, deep under the ground. But every day you dig a little bit, and it takes time. The nature of spiritual growth, of any spiritual madrega that you want to experience, it all takes time. Anything that happens right away is not real, and you'll even notice that when you do, let's say, have a aha moment, or like, oh, you have a class, you're like, wow, like Hashem's real, like I don't want to do anything else. And then the next moment it leaves you, right? Because it's not real. You didn't earn it, right? The nature of spirituality is based in the Gemara. It says that Hashem tells you when you come to wait, because he wants to be there with you in the process. He wants to be with you on the journey. There's a journey that's required. But when it comes to something which is not real, or something which is physically enticing, you'll see you get it right away. So again, all the more so that it's hard for me to cry, and I've been trying to do Ibodedut for, let's say, years now, and learning Rabbi Nachman's teachings. All the more so that what you're doing is so important, and you're wanting to. It's so valuable in ways that we can't possibly understand. And eventually, with Hashem's help, the well springs that are within you are even deeper than a person who's more naturally sensitive, who's able to cry even easier. It's because, like, if you don't know that, you won't have the inspiration, you won't have the courage, you won't have the willpower to get to the point that you actually get to experience that. Does that make sense, Fed?
Yeah, thanks. And could I ask a completely different question?
Yes.
So, I don't really know if it's like a steer or not, but so the first lesson of Likud Iman is like we have to use our head to kind of like find Hashem and everything, right? And
Okay,
so
well, that's not what it says. It says you need to look for the chokhmah and everything.
The chokhmah.
Yeah.
Fine. The chokhmah and everything. Okay. But that's using our head, right?
No.
So isn't that the servant?
No. So that's the chiddush.
Oh.
Yeah. So the whole chiddush of that first Torah is he brings this paradox that he says that the essence of a Jew is, and our mission in this world is to look for the chokhmah in everything. Not to satisfy ourselves with what things appear to be superficially, but to look for Hashem's wisdom in each thing. Okay? Now, you might think to yourself, then I need to intellectually process and use my mind to ascertain what is that chokhmah and everything. But you see clearly in the next part of the lesson that he says that it's impossible to see the chokhmah of Hashem in anything except through the nun. And in this case, the nun is malchut, the nun is tefillah, the nun is emunah, the nun is simplicity, pashitus. Okay? Because the chokhmah of Hashem is not an intellectual entity. It's not something that a human mind can grasp. It's something which is deeper than the human mind, which is why scientists know nothing of spiritual truths. Because the wisdom of God is something which is totally transcendent this world and one's mind. And therefore, to be able to understand Hashem's wisdom in anything, you actually need to access something deeper than even your own intellectual faculties. And that, like we're saying, is the kerchief around the head. That's faith. And that through simple faith, which you get through toiling and learning Torah, but it's through the faith itself is the mechanism for seeing the chokhmah and everything. It's not through utilizing my mind to find it intellectually. We see from this Torah already that there is a tremendous vulnerability, and that's why it's brought out in the first Torah, that a person can confuse themselves deeply by thinking that they're using their mind to find the chokhmah in things, and really it's only their fantasies which are playing out in their mind because of their broken heart. So how do I overcome this? How do I be able to see truly the Chokhmah in everything, the place of Hashem in everything? So there's a pasuk from Shlomo Melech. It says that Chokhmah comes out of ayin. Chokhmah comes from nothing. And according to Kabbalah, they explain that the sphere of Chokhmah, it actually is drawn from the highest sphere of Keter. Keter is the unknowable head. That's what they call it. It's the crown. It's something which transcends the mind. And Chokhmah comes from that place. So Rabbi Nachman spends many lessons trying to get us to understand how do we access Chokhmah. It's through Keter, meaning what? Nothingness. What does that mean, nothingness? Bittul. Ayin. That through nullification of my own limited self, of my own physical lackings, of my own limited mindsets and thoughts, I'm able to actually access nothingness, the ayin, the nullification of ego, and from that place, from my mind's eye, from that place of nothingness, Chokhmah comes from. And that's the secret Rabbi Nachman alludes to and Rav Natan brings out of why Moshe Rabbeinu was able to draw the Torah. What was so unique about Moshe that he revealed the entire Torah? There is no Torah beside the Torah of Moshe. We say this. Moshe Emes, Moshe Emes, right? Torah is Emes, Moshe is Emes. Why? Because Moshe brought us the Torah. There is no Torah beside Moshe. In fact, Rabbi Nachman brings down that the gematria of Moshe Rabbeinu is 613. It's amazing, right? Like the amount of mitzvot that there are. He is the revelation of the Torah. Now, what did Moshe do that made him able to reveal God in this world at the highest level and forever? Because it's always true, the Torah. Even when Mashiach comes, he's going to reveal deeper levels of that Torah. It's not a new Torah, it's the same Torah. He revealed the truth completely. Why? Very simple. Moshe was the most humble man in the world. Because Moshe said, Ma nachnu, what am I? He really, mamish, didn't think he was better than anybody else. He actually held that if anybody was in his shoes, they would do a better job than he would. Moshe didn't think he was better than anybody. Moshe didn't think that even his own abilities came from him. He knew that they all came from Hashem. Because he had reached this ultimate level of complete bittul, of self nullification, he was able to access ayin, nothingness, the place of the keter. And that was where the Torah came from. That's where Chokhmah came out of. So you'll see in the rest of that first lesson, that's why it's very important to go through the whole thing, that Rabbi Nachman is constantly like flipping you. Like he kind of like, he gives you like a thing to make you want that thing. Oh man, like I want to see the Chokhmah in everything. I want to see the good in everything. I want to see the godliness in everything. But then he says it comes about through a completely different way than you think you would get it. Oh, you think you're going to get it from thinking really hard. You actually get it from releasing your thoughts. Okay? Just like almost, so to speak, like a person who's trying really hard to understand something and then he takes a nap and then when he wakes up, it just pops into his head. Because it comes from nothingness. And then again, so then how do I get to the state of bittul? I think I get to it by being ignorant. You know, but that's not how you get it. You actually get it by toiling and Torah learning. So we have like this whole unbelievable first lesson in Likutei Moharan that even though it wasn't the first lesson Rabbi Nachman taught, Rav Natan, you see it was so fundamental for him that he felt like it was the ikar, it was the essence, that he made it the first lesson in Likutei Moharan. Because we have all of these paradoxical steps that bring us to the purpose of our life, which is to see Hashem hidden in every aspect of our life. We do it through emunah, we do it through faith, we do it through prayer, we do it through self-nullification. But the only way to achieve that state of bittul is through learning Torah b'koach, by learning Torah out loud, by learning Torah with joy, by learning Torah even when it's difficult to. And by doing these things, you're able to actually empower your capacity to believe in Hashem, your ability to believe with simplicity and with genuinity. And then through that simple faith, I'm able to access and ascertain what is the chokhmah in each thing. Does that make sense, Fed?
Yep, thanks.
Any other questions before we sign off?
Yes, Rabbi, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. I feel like I can easily cry for Hashem to change my life circumstances. And I feel like I want that more than I want to feel close to Hashem. And I feel like if I just focus on crying to be close to Hashem, I'm not being faithful to my life circumstances to change and for life circumstances to change for my family members or for my friends.
Right, I understand that. The Gemara says that there is no lacking in this world except for a poverty of da'at. And if a person has da'at, what does he lack? What is da'at? Very simply, da'at is to know that everything is from Hashem. So we see very clearly from Chazal that the pain of this world does not cause the suffering of this world. Suffering, emotional suffering, psychological suffering, not pain. It comes from really not internalizing that whatever is taking place is from Hashem and from His love and for the good. And if you could just try and meditate on this, if whatever is going on in your life, you somehow were shown how all the greatest things that will ever take place, the coming of the Mashiach, the ending of exile, the Tichiyat HaMeitim, the healing of every single person in this world, peace and unity and love, is all coming from somehow these things are taking place to the ones that are close to you. That they themselves signed up for this before they even came down to this world, knowing full well that this would bring the Geula. So for sure you would still be in pain, because there's something to be in pain about. But would you suffer? Suffering comes from a lack of da'at. And so when a person thinks that not like if I'm not crying over the situations that are taking place, I'm not being truthful, and it's not real for me to cry to be close to Hashem. But be'emet, if you're close to Hashem, there is no good in the world besides Hashem. So everything you're looking for is through closeness to Him, right? Even to the extent that you could go through all the same things and you could be completely happy. It doesn't mean that you're happy, you're cruel, it doesn't mean that you're ignorant, but that on a daily basis you could have a time each day that you pour your heart out to Hashem, but then to know when you're done that this is exactly what Hashem wants. And from that place you can draw tremendous joy. That you see all the tzaddikim in history, that even though they went through crazy trials and tribulations, tragedies, right? They were happy, actually happy, not just forcing themselves. How could they actually be happy? Because they knew Hashem. They believed in Hashem, that He's good, that somehow this is good, even though it completely broke the matrix of their logic. They believed that it's good. Why? Because they were able to immerse themselves so wholeheartedly in the spiritual journey, to the extent that they were gifted this ability to know and believe it's from Hashem even when they don't understand it. And we have to work very hard for that, very, very hard. But it's even more meaningful when it happens. So, like the Baal Shem Tov, he used to speak about this a lot. Let's say he'd say, for instance, you see a woman. Let's say a man sees a woman, she's a beautiful woman. And he's attracted to her, right? He sees her, she's beautiful. The nature of beauty is to attract you, right? So whereas like in the past, maybe you would just try not to look, but a lot of people who they don't look, they know that when they try not to look, they end up looking more, right? Like with anything. So the Baal Shem Tov had a very deep spiritual mechanism that he encouraged. Well, the Baal Tanya says this is not for a generation for us not to do anymore. We're not capable of it, but just to know that there's such a thing and to try to apply it to what we're doing now. He said you should think and meditate on what is it that's attracting you about this person. And you're going to find that what attracts you about this person is their beauty. That's the answer. Now, he says, with that being said, recognize you're attracted not to them, you're attracted to the beauty. What's the proof of that? because years from now, they're not going to look like this anymore. So, but they're beautiful. If they're beautiful, physically beautiful, so then where is that a few years from now? Where is that going? So the answer obviously is that they are not beautiful. They possess physical beauty. They possess it. So now once a person is able to disentangle this person from their physical beauty and understand that the beauty is not theirs, but it's being possessed by them. So now the Baal Shem Tov says, now imagine, this is physical beauty. This is in the world of action, in the lowest of all the worlds, and there are myriads and myriads and myriads of spiritual worlds which are higher than this world. This is, according to the Zohar, like the toenail of existence, okay? And the beauty that you're attracted to, the visceralness of that, the power of the magnetism of this person's beauty for you, that you can't stop thinking about it, you can't stop looking at it, how much you want it. That's the toenail of beauty. And if you go and you understand where is that beauty coming from, if I understand it's not hers, she's just possessing it, so obviously there's a source of that beauty. And that source is above all those worlds. And imagine what type of beauty that is. So the Baal Shem Tov says, now, once you have gone through this meditation, you'll start to yearn for Hashem's beauty. And we say that the Beit HaMikdash is the beauty of the Jewish people. It's the beauty of Hashem. That whatever was in that space, that same magnetism, that same awe, that same overwhelming pull for something so deeply, that was in that space. And then you can start to yearn for actual beauty. And he calls this what in psychology we would call sublimation. Right? He calls it a different, more spiritual term or appellation, but really it's something called sublimation. I'm taking something which is limited and physical, and I'm elevating it back to its source. So too here, you can start with the fact that you're in pain from this place, and you have to be honest and truthful about it. But you can't stop there. You have to also ask Hashem, please help me, because I know that be'emet, that this good that I want for them, it's not inherent good, it's coming from you. And good at its source must be so much even greater than even these things that I want for them. And then you start to yearn for it, and then you can cry for that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Of course. Any other final questions? One second here. What is a person is applying oneself wholeheartedly, channeling pain into the pain of Hashem and yearning during Tikkun Chatzot, Bodedut, and still the Koach Medameh just seems to be amplifying to unbelievable degrees, almost like the more effort into Avodat Hashem, the more Koach Medameh is being experienced. Is there a concept of Koach Medameh that precedes the Aliyah? So one thing is that the closer you get to the thing, the more that the forces of negativity are going to confound on you to try and stop you from what you're doing, especially when you're very close, like we're learning in this story. Okay, so that's one thing, to know that if I'm really onto the thing, then I'm going to have tremendous obstacle to that thing. They have to come together. It's impossible not to. Okay, so if anything, to take it as a sign that I'm really onto something. Okay, so that's one thing. For sure, there has to be a descent before there's an aliyah. That's also true. But I would also add that Rabbi Nachman and Rav Natan make it very clear that this time for crying is once a day. It's not all day. You take a time to really let it all out in your hibodedut, to really channel it, to give it everything that you have. And then for the rest of the day, to simply be happy and to know that whatever is going on is exactly what Hashem wants to be. So a person might say to themselves, how could I possibly get to the point that I just let it all out of my boat? It's hard for me to do that. So actually, it's a very interesting thing. I thought about it. If for 23 hours you're forcing yourself to be happy, and every negative thought that comes your way, you force yourself to think about something positive. You have something painful that takes place, you move past it without giving it energy, even though in the past you normally would. So then if you do that for 23 hours, like Rabbi Nachman seems to be encouraging us to do, then by the time you get to your Ibodah, you have so much to let go of, right? But it's in a proper place. One of the main things that the Torah is trying to give us is a fence. It's boundaries. Like when we think of boundaries, especially in the secular modern world, we think of something which is like antithetical to good. But really, so even the psychological world is starting to truly understand that just as harmful as, let's say, abuse or neglect or any type of trauma is actually lack of healthy boundaries. That when a person doesn't have healthy boundaries, they don't feel safe. When a person doesn't have healthy boundaries, they don't have a framework within to make a beautiful life from. Healthy boundaries are just as important as what fills the boundaries. You need both of them, right? And so Chassidus is like giving you this unbelievable aura, but it's also trying to help you to create healthy boundaries. Whereby the Chassidic masters, they are not telling you not to feel things. They're not telling you not to do things. They're telling you there's a time for this and there's a time for that, right? There's a time to pour forth your broken heart. It's for 1 hour a day in Hibodah. And then there's a time to be happy. That's for 23 hours for the rest of the day, okay? Now, you'll see when you really practice this, that instead of allowing yourself to fall in it and comfort yourself knowing, I have a time I'm going to do this, right? It's like, for instance, I have a meeting with my boss, right? So if I know every day I have this 1 hour supervision with my boss, so then I know that for the rest of the day, even when things don't go the way that I hope they went, or something confuses me or befuddles me, I know I have that hour supervision tomorrow, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep going. But if I don't know I have that hour of supervision, I don't have this time to speak it over, so then I'm constantly concerning myself. How can I get to my boss? How can I talk it over with him? How can I take care of the situation right now, right? I have to do it. I have to take care of it. But if you understand you have this time every day, then you'll be able to shelf it, right? It doesn't mean shelf it forever. It doesn't mean that you are not paying attention to your feelings. It means having a time that you do so. Having a time and a place for each thing. Doing this is very healthy. You'll notice as well that when you do this, you don't lose anything. Right? We feel, because of a power of imagination, that if I don't attend to this thing right now, if when a painful thought comes up, I don't pay attention to it, I'm somehow going to miss out on something good in my life, even though I know that nothing ever good ever came from this. Right? You'll notice that when you actually apply yourself in this, that I try so hard to be besimcha for the whole day, and I really through that develop this frustration and this holy frustration, that by the time I get to my hour, I really let it all go. You'll see that not only did you not lose anything, you gained everything. Okay? Chaya, I hope that helped you. One question about making life decisions. Are we supposed to be in bittul or to use our mind? So we're learning from this. We're past the point of using our mind. We're so far asleep. We're so far in exile because of the eating from the tree of physical excess, because of the drinking from the river of secular wisdom, from the now empowerment of the power of imagination within each of us that Rabbi Nachman says is going to be the final revelation of negativity in the world that we have to overcome for the Geula to take place. That will be the greatest impediment to all good things in our life. So the greatest sakana, Rabbi Nachman says, is to rely on your own thoughts to make decisions for yourself. You have to hold up your faith and your tears to the wisdom and the advice of true tzaddikim. And you will see that by following their eitzah and turning their Torah into tefillah and utilizing their wisdom to create healthy yearnings for yourself, you'll see that through this you'll be directed to all the right decisions, to have all the right advice, and to see only blessing and beauty in your life. Okay, I hope everybody has an amazing week. Please, I can't encourage you enough. I see that in the men's group, in the women's group, things have slowed down since the Chagim. That happens sometimes. I know that happens, for a multitude of reasons. Also for me, there was a lot that was going on. We have to start over again. It's so, so, so important. There is no finding the princess without talking to your friends every day about the journey. And don't think to yourself, oh man, well I missed out for this whole time. Doesn't make a difference. You just start over again, right? Talk about your thoughts from this class. Everybody who is in this class, take it upon yourself, even if it's 1 or 2 or 3 lines, even if it's snapshots. Just say what you took from the class. That's it. Get the conversation rolling. And then you'll see that amazing revelations come. Just like there's a big, what's it called? Yetzer hara, not to do hibodedut, just like there's a big Yetzer hara not to want to learn the teachings of Rabbeinu. There's also a big Yetzer hara not to want to speak over with people who are on the journey with you about what's going on with you. This is a very, very big error, and it's keeping us in exile longer. Okay? We have nothing to worry about. We have nothing to fear. We have Hashem. We have His Torah. We have true tzaddikim, and we have our godly souls. Hashem is not going to leave us. He's not going to abandon us. We're not perfect. We all know we're not perfect. We're all struggling. We all know we're struggling. There's nothing to pretend about. It's okay. It's totally fine. It's what we're here for. It's beautiful. It's our heroic story. And it doesn't, obviously you have to feel comfortable with it. You don't want to go beyond where you feel safe. But you always have to try to push it a little bit, push it a little bit more, push it a little bit more. You can't imagine how much healing comes from this, how many revelations you'll get from those conversations. Some of the biggest chidushim you'll get in Rabbi Nachman's Torah come from speaking over his Torah to friends. Everybody have an amazing week. Walk with what we learned, pray on what we learned, and Bezrat Hashem, we're going to meet next week and start to learn about the Golden Mountain and the Pearl Castle.